have the Tesla Model 3 coming, the next generation Nissan Leaf coming, other long-range affordable cars coming. The market's going to change very quickly, and we have to be able to efficiently and effectively get charging stations ready for this, right? So practically and technically there are various challenges. What, go maybe starting on Peter and coming back down, what are one or two key technical or financial challenges that you think still need to be sort of overcome and worked through in this market, either policy-wise, politically, or just else on the private market?
I think the biggest.
Two? Sure.
So if I should name the biggest one, the challenge is definitely the utilization. So we know that we are in a business where utilization of the network, whatever we will build, is not perfect. It's still low, and out of this comes a lot of implications. So the low utilization means that the payback time of your investment is low. It means as well the implication of the impact of capacity charge, which Rafael mentioned today in the morning, that basically you need to pay to the DSO quite a huge amount of money every month just to be connected and to be ready to suck the energy. But in the same time, you are not really using it very often. So that's the fact which needs to challenge and which should basically need to consider in your business. And
I think that's something you highlighted the other day with Fastnet, how much money they're eating because the utilization is low and they're trying to build a really adequate network. And it's all about long-term vision. So then what do you need for that to achieve what's necessary and make it through those years of lower utilization but building out the network? I mean, you need money, basically, right?
I'll add one more point onto that, because in the energy storage industry, there's an even worse problem. It's because the DSO will then tax the asset owner twice for first charging and then giving back energy to the grid. So taxing is definitely a pretty important thing to eliminate.
Yeah. And you need investment, but what do you need from this investment? What do you need in the investment community to understand or to see to get that investment? I mean, some companies have drawn a lot, some not as much, and they're more putting in sweat to get it up. But what do you need from the investment community to understand?
Sometimes someone calls it a patient money. So, so someone who understands this is the time when you simply needs to go through. And but it's not only about investment; it's as well about how you set up the market, for example. And since the utilization is so important in charging infrastructure business, I tend to link any kind of support, any kind of measures, which from the cities, from the government, from the DSO, set up of the new pricing scheme for electricity, whatever, to the number of electric vehicles on the road. So. I think whatever we think how to help to go through this phase, whatever kind of help, it should be somehow predictable. And I think that a good measure is simply to have a look on how many vehicles are on the street. I say, okay, there are certain measures which should be in place until we reach 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%, 15%. Because then, if we got sufficient number of electric vehicles on the street, that's all up to the market players to be clever enough to make a business out of it. So, but if it's not, there should be certain supporting measures. But I just want to say, should the supporting measure be predictable and I can rely on them, that should be something which is linked to the number of vehicles on the street.
And from the governmental side, the city side, you can provide land for free. You can give away land. You can. Your network here is co-financed a bit by the EU, and that's the EU is doing a great job of co-financing infrastructure. David, you have extensive experience with what cities have done to help charging companies cross that gap. What else can be done?
So I think a challenge that cities face, before I directly answer your question, is in an age of austerity, where they have limited resources and finance and expertise to make this happen, why should they spend time investing in infrastructure for electric vehicles ahead of demand? And that's a really difficult argument to push on a city. So they have to really want to make it happen, and it does come down to champions in that respect. In terms of what cities can and have done to try and do this, I think procurement's an interesting one. You mentioned that in your presentation. So procurement, where you offer land and you offer licenses to operate infrastructure, where you bundle infrastructure provision with car sharing operations. That's quite an effective way to kind of hit two policy objectives. You have shared mobility solutions in your city, but you also have a public charging infrastructure network as well. And then there's also the mobility services that you procure as a city. So if you create a demand for electric mobility by say the school transport services that you procure, maybe it's taxi operators or maybe it's buses or whatever, creates a demand for infrastructure, then the infrastructure will follow. So again, you can create investment in that way. One small related point that I'd like to make though is I think there is also a risk when it comes to utilisation that that operators such as taxi operators or other mobility service operators start to build out their own private networks. And we've already seen companies like Uber say that they're going to build private infrastructure networks so they can guarantee a recharge when they need it. So obviously that dents the business case for the publicly provided infrastructure. I think that's a real risk facing cities that don't take a leading position on this.
I mean, to be frank, with Tesla's shuttle, this is you have to make sure you can get that charge for your next client, and this is a big challenge when there's a limited infrastructure, or even when there's a lot of infrastructure, but a lot of use, like in Norway, where there's problems with this. So I mean, the question is maybe a better coordination of those businesses, so you understand we need to rely on it. We need this spot to be really built out. But back to procurement. Procurement is interesting because first of all, if you buy 300 vehicles for the city, then they can be using charging and support a charging network at a young age. But also, I mean, if they say they procure 20 and say they have a plan next year to get 100 and the year after you get 500, it provides quite a predictable roadmap for an EV charging network, I would think, to follow and say, hey, well, we can follow with you. But back to the point of why, I mean, if you have the cost of health, if you think about the cost of health from pollution, the cost of lost lives, premature death, cancers, I mean, it seems often it's just a matter of them rearranging their books, right? Saying, hey, if we put this money in, we're going to save this much in health costs. And like, Lena, you guys are always great about highlighting the benefits of electric cars, why this is important. I was thinking...
because like in our societies there are no this kind of education, so our people are not thinking about this harmage that usual cars, ICE cars makes to people's lives. And first of all, first situation like this was we have a partner from Norway in Lviv, and we were walking with him in the city center, and in Lviv it's not prohibited to drive big cars like trucks in city center. And one of these trucks came through, and black cloud of gas came after him, and our partner said, oh my God, he's not thinking about how many illnesses he can produce in those pedestrians that are walking here. And
I mean, I'm thinking about it every day. It drives me crazy. It's really a plague on your mind once you think about the health costs and how they could be creating cancer for your 3-year-old daughter, your 1-year-old daughter, or so. But often cities, they look at it and we just accept, okay, there's health costs, oh, we should clean the air. Some top cities, like Palo Alto, they require that every decision calculate the climate and pollution costs of that decision. So in the calculation, they're not just looking at the money spent, the money they get back, but working into all of their calculations for every decision. What's the climate cost? And then that changes the decisions they make, right? Have you seen that? I mean, I assume that's a very niche. I've seen it in Palo Alto and maybe one other place I can't think of. I mean, are there other places where cities are trying to calculate this to make better decisions?
Yeah, but it's complicated. It's a cultural change. I think that's the real difficulty. So in very simple terms, while it might make sense to us, policy is made in silos in government and the local government. So, if investments in electric vehicles come from a transportation budget, they don't really care about public. It's not that they don't care about public health costs, but it's not something that they are set up to consider in the way that they make their decisions.
Exactly.
And the money for that sits over there, and the money for transportation infrastructure sits somewhere else.
And it takes leadership on like city council to say everyone has to consider this cost.
Yeah,
To
yeah. But I think we have seen areas where they give us hope that these connections can be made. The two most logical are the smoking ban. So clearly there's ways where licensing powers were used to support public health, and there was a swell of public support for it based on communication, education, awareness. So that was very much joined at policy making, and that's transformed the lives of many people. The other is the link between active travel and obesity, and that's created a situation where people are, investing a lot more money into cycling and walking. So I think,
And you can also, you can see before now, electric cars weren't quite upfront cost competitive on a pure, consumer level, and they're really hitting that important point where they're becoming very clearly cost competitive and better. So maybe now is becoming more of a time when cities feel they can push more and not just incentivize. And we have these gas bans and diesel bans where they just jump ahead and say, hey, we're not even going to calculate, we're just not going to let these cars in, which is maybe the most exciting option. So getting to Ukraine, so we talked about this before, that Ukraine has a significant EV market share because of a lot of imported Nissan Leafs. From the EV charging perspective, have you guys sort of followed the market? Have you followed this sort of interesting, quicker than normal adoption? Or have you been trying to stimulate it, and that's what's led in part to a lot of the, of course it's both, but
Yes.
But can you say a little bit more how you came about and started Toka?
First, the problem appeared when we bought the first car, and we experienced also taking car rental cars for Nissan Leaf and Tesla. And then we had a problem, we couldn't charge anywhere because at that time we needed it. So that's how idea came. And
when was this? When was this?
in 2015.
15.
Yeah, just 2 years ago.
So all of these other EVs were mostly charging just at home?
Yes, of course. First, I think 99% of all EV drivers they charge at home. Now this percentage a little bit differs because, for example, in our network we have more than 1,000 clients, and about 300 of them are active and more active and charge at night on our stations. So around 30%.
You have 1,000 EV driving clients on the Toka network?
Yes.
Okay. And there's 750 electric cars in Poland.
Yes.
So this gives some good perspective, but keep going about, so
this is, the main idea was to make an opportunity for all those clients that they could rely on your charging network, because it's very important. It's very important when, even it doesn't matter is it free or it's not, because when you're going somewhere, you need to come to be charged and to go somewhere you need, you should do it. And if not, then nothing will help you or replace this situation. So the main point is that people will charge the network when they know 100% that they're gonna make it. They want to see it, whether it's busy or not. They want to know the status while they're, for example, at work or they're at night. They can see how much they already consumed. And
So I mean, you highlighted a few of my points from the presentation. You know, reliable. It's got to be reliable. There's really a lot of, and cities have to be very careful when they support or incentivize or give contracts to charging networks that they have a track record of reliability, right? Because there's a lot that don't. And then the networked.
smart network works
System.
because, for example, when it's monitored all the time, 24/7, and if something happens, we have 2 hours, our service manager to come and fix it, even if there are no clients over there. And that makes more efficient because I'm as a network operator, the first person wants to improve its efficiency. So that's why when it's not working, it's not earning money. That's why we're always trying to be it online, all stations working, and be ready to charge our clients.
So getting back to the practicality of installing stations, I mean, Rafael had some interesting pictures earlier. I heard several times from different networks, from Tesla and other networks, that the permitting process in Poland was a huge barrier to their entry, and it really slowed down their entry. And I mean, permitting is is permitting the top challenge generally across the I feel like in the US as well, there's permitting and leasing, finding good land sites, good locations are the top barriers. And once charging station networks have solved those, is there anything that can be done at this point or should be done elsewhere in the region, in the CE?
I think also we should a little bit change the way we think, because let's be true, today's technology will never replace, for example, our classic cars in its way. So if we want to drive electric car, we should understand what our navigation will be, because technical question is also a very big problem, because you'll never find a great connection for 5-6 megawatts, for example, in order to replace one gas station, which can fulfill one car for like just a few minutes. Yeah, and it has like
It's a very different.
8. Yes, it's a big problem because we have 8. Yes, not turning point for gas, oil points. Yes, pumps. Yes, petrol pumps, and each can every 3 minutes get full tank for.
I think it's a very important point to understand. It's a different thing. We're not just switching from one fuel to another. It's a different transportation experience. I tried to highlight that a bit. It's great if you can. I was surprised because you think with a gas car, you drive and you find a gas station. It's easy. It's convenient. When I drove to Paris, it was easier because you just put Paris in your navigation and they tell you where to stop and charge. So I think the more we can integrate this kind of route planning and I think that I'm surprised it's not further along than it is, to be honest, because it's such an easy, not easy to implement, but it's such a big benefit, an easy benefit of EVs. But back to the permitting and leasing, what can be done in Poland, if anything, and also elsewhere in the CEE to fix, improve the permitting and leasing challenge of networks?
I would like just to underline this question about egg and chicken, because we think that this is like a measure answer. We need to take the answer that first of all we need a lot of chargers. Like it's not a question of egg and chicken. First comes chargers, then comes cars. And we have statistics that one charger bring 20 cars to it. Like people see that it's not future, far future. They just starting to investigate what is it for. They interested in this and so on and so forth. So
I agree. Chargers first.
I don't.
It puts it puts a lot of pressure on charging companies because it's hard to finance without the utilization. But also, I see chargers as one of the best marketing tools, and that's why I'm very strongly highlight the benefit of good coloring, good lighting.
Exactly. Yes, because it's kind of advertising.
It makes people. How many people see a charging station like that and then think, "Hey, EVs are coming,"
and they're
EVs
cool.
are here. So that's gonna reach hundreds.
Yeah, they can see it, but they can't. They don't know that this is EV cars. They just see the sign.
I mean, if it's done well, they should know, right?
Yes, exactly. And actually, about these investments you asked before, I think that if government and other, I don't know, social stars will speak more about electric vehicles, about this problem, more articles, more TV programs, everything like this, more test drives of electric vehicles on openings of chargers, what we are actually doing. We are making kind of celebration when we are opening a new charger station, not because it's, wow, we opened it. No, because we can just invite more people and show them cars, make test drives for them, make kind of fun, and then they just love it and they want to have it.
Fun element is good. You guys are having a press conference on every opening of a fast charger, or not all of them?
No, some yes we do. Some of them essentially, and those the first, one of the first, but not every one of them.
You should make everyone celebrate.
And make them fun. Make them.
We're trying.
It made me think. I was visiting Fastnet headquarters in the Netherlands a few years ago, and every station they put up, they had a disco ball in their office, a silver disco ball, and they would have a party every time. But just for the staff, and I thought, well, really bring that to the community, right?
We do.
Have these-
Just saying that not everyone really,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's happening twice a week and it's not so easy to organize. Going back to your permitting process.
That's a hard question, yeah.
Hard question. I think you need to go to it when you develop a network. That you need to go from two angles. One is that yes, every simplification of the process is good, and there are some small stuff like if all building offices understand that they should not require the full process but a simplified process, because it's not a big building but it's really something which doesn't require such a complicated. So there is a one angle. So make a unified, I would say, rules for commissioning of the chargers definitely would help on a national level, and then very well distributed to every small building offices. And another angle which you have is basically that the obstacles during the permitting process could be well expected. So you have a certain location where you, by your expertise, can expect that this is going to be complicated, and you have another location where you know that it's not going to be complicated. So basically what you do is when you are trying to search a location, you have to find much more in the beginning as a kind of funnel. So you start with a 4 times more location than you actually will deploy. And one of the criteria how it goes out of the list is that it's complicated. So 2 ways how to tackle this. So do those which are not complicated. That's the point.
And do you have any suggestions for how the process could be simplified by cities or any other players?
That's what I said. Usually, at least in this part of Europe, we have 2 ways how you can, 3 ways what you need to do with a building office. So either it's a full process, let's call it. I don't want to have a special name in Poland, but it's a full process where you need a lot of institutions involved, and you need a lot of permits and everything. And it's very good for building. If you want to create a building like this one, then you need to go through the full process. And then there's a simplified process where you're building something small, garage, or even something more simpler. And then there's a possibility of completely nothing. So you are building.
But then you need like city council or something to say, hey, for EV charging stations.
It's a rule in a regulation, because what naturally the charging point is usually not somehow treated in regulation, which is usually very old. And then local authorities are not sure which way to go. either require really a full process, like with the building, or a small or nothing. So the first thing to do is to just give it guidelines from a national level saying, okay, this is a charger, this is not a bad animal, it's going to harm anything, there's not going to leak anything out of it to the water, so it's fine. You do
So
not
it should
require-
just be from a national level, this should be classified as this and all.
Yeah, and you don't have to require a whole bunch of things which you normally require, because people on local building offices tends to be rather cautious and rather say, okay, let's go through the whole process because I'm covered.
And if people get electrified, it's not a big deal anyway.
I think that it's even more about education, just to deliver this information that those chargers, wall boxes, it's about security as well. It's about not to make grid damaged and not about to make damages for your car. So it's like it should be obligatory for developers to make these parking spots with special wall boxes. And if city government can say so, they can.
There has to be a list of certified
Yeah.
infrastructure
Yes,
that can be.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, but my point in Ukraine is we don't even have a definition of EV charger in our legislation still.
I mean, I think
We
that's-
have so many EV chargers, but we don't have even a definition of it. First, then of course, if you want to do it on, I don't know, a city's land somewhere in public place, is almost impossible. It's like a miracle, because in order to connect to grid, you must take this land 3-5 years, depending on what kind of EV charger you're going to install. You have to rent this land or to buy it. So it's impossible to do it in Kyiv, in right places, in public places. And then there is a big problem to connect this place to grid. So most 99%
definitions in there, gets
99% of all our stations, they are installed on private territory, different private business, and they are connected through those have already their own. And of course, if we're talking about the permission, we should start first from the definitions. We should admit that this process has started, and everybody should vote for that. Where are we going? If we want, so we need a plan for these public stations. How many cars are?
I think this came back to what we talked a lot about with the working group was having, being a champion, understand, having a full, coming at it with why is this important, what's the vision, what's the long-term goal, and then what's our plan for how we achieve
Yes,
this.
in big cities, I think we should close city center for classic IC cars.
Right.